Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Been off the air for a little bit while I've been moving, and now I'm back into a new space, ready to start recording again. And what are we going to record? Right away, we're going to talk about a new setting for Savage Worlds by Tracy Sizemore called the Han Cluster, which is a very positive spin on a science fiction adventure. Very cool. So let's get into it. Savage Worlds, one of the best games. Hey everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango, your friendly neighborhood Savage Worlds YouTube channel, and I would love you to look at the bubbles, do the stuff just like we always want, so we can get those likes and subscribes. We're back. We feel excited to be able to start doing content again. Hopefully I can get the room set up the way I want it soon, but that's not important right now. Right now, we're going to talk about the Han cluster. And so let's talk about the Han cluster right away and use Tracy's words to describe it. The Han Cluster RPG is a game about optimism. It's not about living in a perfect world or pretending everything is okay when it's not. No, the Han Cluster is about facing the future with hope. Even when things look their bleakest, human flaws can fuel powerful motivations. Human failures can transform into beautiful triumphs. But most of all, when humans work together, we can overcome impossible odds. So that gives you a feel for what's going on in this game. So it takes place in 2653. There's been 300 years of kind of a peace between all the different humans on different planets, primarily between those in the Han cluster and those in the humans on Earth. And it's all because of this thing called the Nex, which I'll talk about, which was discovered about 300 years ago. So there's a lot of history at the beginning of the book that talks about how humans discovered space travel using what's called Christium hyperdrive, invented by a gentleman named Carl Hahn, spelled with a K, should be spelled with a C, but what are you going to do? And how they bridged out into the stars, how different planets were discovered, how the conflict arose over resources. So it's very, 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 very rich. It talks about how machines became enlightened and linked themselves to the Nexus, the Nex is kind of the fundamental core tenet of people in this setting, how they're linked together, how they interact with each other, things they can do. There's things called X-Ghosts, there's things called X-Weapons, and all this sort of ties together into this setting. So let's talk about creating characters. So I'll get into a lot of the details of some of the setting rules and the things that make it unique, but let's start ahead and go ahead and talk about creating characters. The book starts with a bunch of character concept ideas, such as a black marketeer, engineer, Next technician, a bandit, former bandit, Next driver, that sort of thing. So for example, a Next driver, you are a rare adept with ability to directly manipulate the Next energy through your body. You may be devastating combat specialists or able to provide unique talents and support that seem to break the laws of nature. So there are arcane backgrounds in this book for sure, as there should be. And then you go and you choose a homeworld world where you come from. There's some additional skills. Next, which is based on smarts, which is your core skill for all linked beings. It is new to Han Cluster, obviously, and it really uses it's the skill that's deals with all the transhuman abilities, ghost attachment, ghost traveling, all that kind of stuff. There's also tapping, which is a spirit skill. Tapping represents the mastery over the Draxel, which I'll talk about, which is a piece of technology that really enables a lot of interesting stuff in the game. And it is used for casting skills for Draxel, Tapper, Arcane background. So one of the other things is there's a thing in the concept in the game called the blinding, which is where the Next auras used to be vivid colors and you could see them. They're gradually, for everybody, going to grayscale, black and white kind of thing. But the player characters, they can still see in vivid colors because they're unique and can see these Next auras the way they are. And it's part of what makes them special. It's part of the reason they're part of this crew. And honestly, within there's a whole nother book that's describes the plot point campaign, and that's sort of kind of fundamental to the plot point campaign. So there's new edges. There's about there's new hindrances too, about 5 new hindrances. One a key one is Draxilus, which means the character does not have a Draxel, which is a huge limitation. There's about 20 new edges, all very flavorful. None of them are regurgitation of existing edges, just with a new skin on them. They really make sense. Like, for example, one is Resilient Ghost, and this character gets a free reroll when attempting to resist the effects of any banish field, which would take a ghost and shove it back to the body, which is called capped. If you don't have your ghost out, you're called capped. And there's also a Next Technician, which, is an expert interacting with Next-based technology and has, benefits based on that. So really kind of cool as far as all that goes into it. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence in the book, and characters around that, and how kind of the robots became enlightened, and some of them became linked with the Next to show that they're not just dumb machines. And so there's a talk about artificial intelligence, linked intelligence, which is the linked machines. And so a lot of information on that. Characters can be linked machines. And so there's a whole section on kind of choosing yourself and putting yourself together, like in many books where you choose a chassis, you slot in abilities. It feels kind of like ancestral creation, with points being added and taken away. Also feels a little bit like mod building. So it gives a lot of flexibility to the player who wants to play kind of one of these linked intelligent machines. Then comes to the gear section, and this is where the Draxel comes in. The Draxel is a tiny Christium-infused glass wafer invented by a Next manipulator named Karina Lutz in 2559. So the Drexel is is keyed to an individual. So each individual has it. You can load in X gear, X weapons, that sort of thing into it, which then allows you to be using those in the Next. It also provides the ability to do instantaneous communication through, I forget the name of the network, but through the network, the Drexel Communication Network. And so finally in Chapter 6, we go through the gear, we learn Drexels, we finally get to the meat of the Next, and it talks about X ghosts and X bonding. So what's an X ghost? I alluded to it, is every linked being has an X ghost which may be detached from their physical body, similar to the idea of astral projection, except that X ghosts are semi-corporeal and exist halfway between reality and the dimension we call the Next. X bonding is a phenomenon where 2 or more linked beings develop this deep emotional connection, and all the player characters in the game are X-bonded so that they can do one of the things that the system allows them to do, where they have a telepathic link, the instantaneous communication, and they can ghost travel, which this ability allows one X-ghost to travel instantly to the ghost, whether capped or ghosted, of someone who they're X-bonded with. This ability ignores concerns about distance, intervening obstacles, relative speed, and inertia. So it lets the players play together and not worry about sort of the splitting the party thing, which is really kind of cool in a science fiction setting where now everybody doesn't have to be trapped on a single starship so that they're together and they can do adventures together. They can be all over discovering new things and still be together. Now, an interesting sidebar about healing in the book is your real body takes damage when your ghost takes damage. And so there is a possibility that if you're far flung across the galaxy and you become incapacitated, there may be nobody around. You may be so far away from friends, from help, that there's just nobody there to help you. That is a kind of a cool way to limit it, so that it's not just completely wide open. There is some potential consequences that you have to think about as you're playing. So very, very cool. Then after that, of course, we talk about the arcane backgrounds. So there's the Drexel Tapper. Oh, so there's a few of them, but here's an example of a couple. There's a Drexel Tapper. When a parent exploit is found, it always seems to be patched itself before it can be exploited again. Over time, only a very few select few called Draxel tappers have proven as adapted as the network itself, able to create small and temporary disruptions or exploits that disappear almost as rapidly as they appear. So that's an Arcane background. And the powers, some of the powers are modified, some of the powers are kind of tweaked for the setting, and they include things now called epic modifiers, which we've seen in other books where there's an additional modifiers that are, you know, at a level higher than your kind of traditional ones that you see in the core book. So very cool. There's some new powers: Banish S-Ghost, Disguise X-Ghost, feedback, which has caused feedback to a Drexel, causing damage, suppressing Drexel, and Tracer. So there's a few new powers, but then are the setting rules. The coolest things, the Nex, the Drexel, all that sort of stuff's covered otherwhere. So this is more about environmental effects, atmospheric conditions, sort of meat and potato stuff of science fiction. There's a GM section with a lot of interesting information about the hidden Han. It's called the hidden Han cluster. That things that you don't want to give away from players. There's so much material in the beginning of the book that players do know and understand. So this is interesting to have some of these, have this section just for Game Master. It includes kind of tours of different worlds, sort of the details of the worlds. It has random tables on creating adventures. And then finally, there is a section called Allies and Enemies, which is, you know, got interesting wild cards and human roles that you might encounter, and that sort of thing. One of the things about the Han cluster is it doesn't have the concept of a lot of xenomorph and aliens. It's about humans and human nature and that sort of thing. So a lot of interesting characters you can just pull in and use for your campaign. So Han Cluster, in summary, a great book. Tracy's done an incredible job of the ecosystem. There's figure flats for it. There's a whole nother plot point book for it. A lot of great material. It adds some very interesting things to science fiction genre, the Next and the Drexel, that allow for the way the players interact and the way the game works to be kind of different and unique from your traditional science fiction where everybody's stuck on a starship, traveling around the galaxy, solving problems. It's got a different feel, and it does have a positive feel. So that's the Han Cluster. I'm Carl with Tabletop Tango. Look at the bubbles, do the stuff. Feel a little rusty here, but hopefully you still enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you next one.
Savage World, one of the best games to game.